Good day everyone. In this video, we will show you the break-even analysis of our business 0 to 9. First, I will present the following information regarding the variable cost and fixed cost of the business. For the variable cost in retail, it is inclusive of cost of merchandise, shipping costs, and other variable costs attributable to retail. For the service, it is inclusive of supplies, depreciation, and other variable costs attributable to service. Here are the following costs for the retail. For food, dry food per 1 kilogram sack has a selling price of 160 and variable cost 120. Semi-moist food per pouch, selling price 510, variable cost 470. Canned food per can, selling price 95, variable cost 65. Pet food treats per pouch, selling price 100, variable cost 75. Supplies, bowl and feeders, selling price is 130 and its variable cost is 100. For placemats, selling price is 300, variable cost 250. For cage and houses, selling price 600, variable cost 500. Pet beds, selling price 400 and variable cost 300. For the accessories, collars and leashes has a selling price of 130 and variable cost 100. Clothes, selling price 200, variable cost 150. Carrier or travel bag, selling price 650, variable cost 600. For toys, selling price 80 and variable cost 50. Next, for toiletries, shampoo, soap, and conditioner, selling price 200, variable cost 170. Litter sand, selling price 750 and variable cost 700. Cleaning tools, selling price 350 and variable cost 300. Grooming tools, selling price 310 and variable cost 250. Now lastly, for the medicine, vitamins has a selling price of 420 and a variable cost of 350. For the vaccines, selling price 1000, variable cost 900. And for deworming medicines has a selling price of 480 and variable cost 100. Now let's proceed to the costs in the following services. In pet grooming, this includes costs for equipment and supplies, shampoo, conditioner, and cologne set, ear and eye cleaning kit, dental kit, grooming table, bathing station, dryer or blower, and electric shaver. Pet grooming fee is 800. In pet boarding, this includes costs for food, dog exercise playpen, and 3 pieces pet bed. Pet boarding fee is 500. In pet training, this includes costs for dog treats, playpen, and pet crates. Pet training fee is 500. Moreover, cost for wages per client includes training and grooming with 150 and boarding or sitting with 100. Now let's compute for its variable cost per client. In pet grooming, this includes bathing set 74, which is from the shampoo, conditioner, and cologne set that has a cost of 740 divided by its useful life that is good for 10 washes. For ear and eye cleaning kit, it has a cost of 650 divided by its useful life that is good for 50 uses, total of 13. For dental kit, 20, and direct labor, 150. The total variable cost for pet grooming is 257. Next, the variable cost per client for pet boarding includes food, 150, and direct labor, 100. Lastly is the variable cost per client in pet training includes dog treats, 75, and direct labor, 150, with a total of 225. Lastly, I will present to you the fixed costs of the business in retail and service. Caretaker or groomer and trainer fixed basic pay, 18,300. Sales clerk, 13,187. For rent, 78,000 will be charged to retail and 42,000 will be charged to service, with a total of 120,000. Utilities: 7,500 will be charged to retail, and 2,500 will be charged to service, with a total of 10,000. Advertising or marketing: 1,500 for retail, 1,500 for service, with a total of 3,000. For depreciation, grooming equipments will be charged 608. Now let's take a look in the table how we got 608. Grooming table has a cost of 7,118 and has a useful life of 8 years. Therefore, it has a yearly depreciation of 889.75 and a monthly depreciation of 74.15. Bathing station has a cost of 25,000 and a useful life of 8 years. Therefore, it has a yearly depreciation of 3,125 and a monthly depreciation of 260.42. For dryer and blower, it has a cost of 2,698 and has a useful life of 5 years. Therefore, it has a yearly depreciation of 539.6 and a monthly depreciation of 44.97. Electric shaver has a cost of 777 that has a useful life of 5 years. Therefore, it has a yearly depreciation of 155.4 and a monthly depreciation 12.95. For dog exercise playpen, it has a cost of 1,839 and a useful life of 2 years. Therefore, it has a yearly depreciation of 919.5 and monthly depreciation of 76.63. Pet by 3 pieces has a cost of 2,364 and a useful life of 3 years. Therefore, it has a yearly depreciation of 788 and monthly depreciation of 65.67. Now, for playpen, cost of 1,750, useful life 2 years. Therefore, it has a yearly depreciation of 875 and monthly depreciation 72.92. For pet crates, it has a cost of 979 with useful life of 5 years. Therefore, it has a yearly depreciation of 195.8 and monthly depreciation of 16.32. And since we're going to compute for the break-even that for the month, so we will use the monthly depreciation. Therefore, the total depreciation will be 607.69. So, the total fixed cost for retail is 100,187 and the total fixed cost for service is 64,908. Overall, total fixed cost has a 133,000. Now, more information about the fixed cost. First, all utilities are assumed to be fixed cost. Utility cost amounting to 10,000 is allocated on a 3:1 ratio. Fixed daily wage of caretaker or groomer and the trainer is 381.25 per employee, 6 days of operation per week amounting to 9,150 per month. Salary of the sales clerk is 13,187 per month, and the average salary for a sales clerk per month in the Philippines. Allocation for advertising cost is 50% for retail and 50% for service. Lastly, is the rent expense is allocated on the basis of number of square meters, and 65 square meters are occupied by the sale of products, while 35 square meters are occupied by the rendering of service.
Next is the products. We have here the 5 categories. First is the food, second the supplies, third accessories, fourth toiletries, and fifth medicines. The business 0-9 has these certain inventory levels given below. Since this is still the first year of the business, rates of monthly sales based on inventory level has been determined through the use of information about the relative demands of each products offered by the business. These informations given are only just hypothetical. First category is the food. We have here the dry food, semi-moist food, canned food, and pet food treats. First is the dry food. With an inventory level of 300, the unit of measure is per sack, the sales rate is 90%, and the estimated number of units sold is 270. Second is the semi-moist food with an inventory level of 300, the unit of measure is per pouch, the sales rate is also 90%, and the estimated number of units sold is also 270. Third is the canned food with an inventory level of 300. The unit of measure is per can, sales rate of 90%, and the estimated number of units sold is 270. Fourth is the pet food treats with an inventory level of 400. The unit of measure is per pouch, sales rate is 90%, and the estimated number of units sold is 360. Second category is the supplies. First is the bowls and feeders. With an inventory level of 100, the unit of measure is per piece, sales rate is 60%, estimated number of units sold is 60, and then second is the placemats. With an inventory level of 50, unit of measure is per piece, the sales rate is 60%, estimated number of units sold is 30. Third is the cage and houses with an inventory level of 30. The unit of measure is also per piece. The sales rate is 40% and the estimated number of units sold is 12. Fourth is the pet beds with an inventory level of 30. The unit of measure is per piece. The sales rate is 60% and the estimated number of units sold is 18. Third category is accessories, which is composed of collars and leashes, clothes, carrier or travel bag, and bag toys. First is the collars and leashes. With an inventory level of 100, the unit of measure is per piece, sales rate is 80%, estimated number of units sold is 80. Second is clothes. With an inventory level of 50, unit of measure is per piece, sales rate is 30%, estimated number of units sold is 15. Third is the carrier or travel bag. With an inventory level of 40, the unit of measure is per piece, sales rate of 30%, and the estimated number of units sold is 12. Fourth is the bag toys. With an inventory level of 200, the unit of measure is per piece, the sales rate is 70%, and the estimated number of units sold is 140. Fourth category is the toiletries, which composed of the shampoo or soap, litter sand, cleaning tools, and grooming tools. First is the shampoo or soap. With an inventory level of 300, the unit of measure is per sachet, the sales rate is 90%, the estimated number of units sold is 270. Litter sand with an inventory level of 100, the unit of measure is per piece, sales rate is 50%, estimated number of units sold is 50. Third is the cleaning tools with an inventory level of 100, the unit of measure is also per piece, the sales rate is 90%, estimated number of units sold is also 90. And for the fourth, toiletries, we have here the grooming tools with an inventory level of 50, the unit of measure is per piece, the sales rate is 50%, and the estimated number of units sold is 25. Lastly, we have here the last category, which is the medicines, which compose of the vitamins, vaccines, and deworming medicines. First is the vitamins with an inventory level of 200, the unit of measure is per bottle, and the sales rate is 90%, and the estimated number of units sold is 180. Second is the vaccines, which has an inventory level of 100. The unit of measure is per piece, the sales rate is 70%, and the estimated number of units sold is 70. Lastly, the deworming medicines. We have here the inventory level of 100. The unit of measure is bought per bottle, and then the sales rate is 90%. The estimated number of units sold is 90.
Now that all the significant information has already been discussed and presented, we can now proceed to the computation of the break-even point both in dollar sales and in units for the business. Since, as shown earlier, the fixed costs are allocated to the retail portion and to the service portion of the business, then the break-even point will also be separated. For now, let's first compute for the break-even point in units and in dollar sales for the retail portion. Let's take a look of this table above. These presented here are the products of the business along with their respective categories. Overall, there are 5 product categories, which are food, supplies, accessories, toiletries, and medicines. And below them are the corresponding products, all of which are already copy-pasted from the presented information a while ago. These first 2 rows, selling price and the cost per unit, are already discussed a while ago, and it's the same values from the information sheet. Technically, what is shown here in these columns are the same in what is shown in these rows. Next would be the row about the estimated number of units sold. The values here are the same with what is presented earlier. It is the same with what is presented in this column. Alright, so now let's first determine the sales of each of the product, which is simply multiplying the selling price by the estimated number of units sold. Let's say, for example, for the dry food, that would be 160 multiplied by 270, that will give us an answer of 43,200. Another product, let's say for example the bowl in feathers, that would be 130 pesos times 60 units, that will give us a sales of 7,800. And that is similar with each of the product up until the last column of this table. And presented in the last and the final column would be the total estimated number of units sold, and here in this column, in this row rather, what presented is the total sales, that is 598,700. Next would be what is shown in the variable cost column. That is taken from the product of the cost per unit 120, let's say for example for the dry food, multiplied by the estimated number of units sold 270, we can get 32,400. And that has the same method to each of the products. Let's say another example would be from the accessories product category, the collars and leashes. That would be 100 cost per unit times the 80 units sold, that will give us a variable cost of 8,000. And finally, for the total column, to sum all the variable costs on each of the unit, it will give us a total variable cost of 502,350. And now, for the third row rather, that will give us, for example, in this particular product for the dry food, that is simply deducting 32,400 from 43,200. That will give us a contribution margin for this particular product of 10,800. That is similar, let's say for example, for another product under toiletries, the shampoo or the soap, that would be 54,000 minus 45,900. That will give us a contribution margin for the shampoo or the soap product of 8,100. And finally, the total contribution margin can be get by adding all the contribution margin of the products or simply deducting the total variable cost from the total sales, which will give us an answer of 96,350. Now, that we already have the contribution margin, we can now get the net income or the net loss by simply referencing the fixed cost presented earlier, the 100,187. This is similar to the information tab over here. This one. We have the same value. And as you can see, from the estimated number of units sold, we have here a net loss of 3,837. So why is it negative? It could be that by the combination or the sales mix of this business 0 to 9, the high volume items compose only a small proportion of the sales mix, or it could also be that the low volume products compose a high proportion of the sales mix. Or it could also be that the estimated number of units sold is less than the supposed to be optimum level of units sold for the business, or the break-even point of the business. That's why it is important to determine the break-even point both in dollar sales and in units, so that 0 to 9 will know the goal or the optimum level of sales or in units for the business. Now let's proceed for the computation of the break-even point. What the group has decided to use is the contribution margin ratio method. That is, to get this table as represented here is actually the same on what is presented in the total column, this one. We just simply copy pasted the values of these three. In contribution margin ratio method, we have to determine first the contribution margin ratio so for us to know what to divide to the overall fixed cost. So this one, as you can see over here, this is taken from dividing 96,350 by the sales in total of 598,700. So that will give us a CM ratio of 16.09%. With that, we can already compute for the BEP in dollar sales in overall. But before that, let me discuss first, of course, the sales mix, because this is vital for getting the BEP in dollar sales for each product. So how did we get this sales mix? Based on the estimated units sold, this sales mix is get. How did we arrive at that? So the sales mix is taken by simply dividing the sales in each product by the total sales. This one, 598,700. So for each product, let's say for example under medicines, that would be 75,600 divided by 598,700. And that will give us a sales mix or a rate of 12.63% in the overall sales mix of the business. Another product would be, let's say for example, the bags or toys. That will be 11,200 divided by 598,700. That will give us a rate of 1.87%. So to check and just to make sure that each of the products have given proper rates and are properly allocated, we can get the sum of this column over here, of this row, and it will result 100%, affirming our estimation. So let's go back to the computation of the overall break-even point in dollar sales. That would be dividing fixed cost by the contribution margin ratio. So fixed cost is already given or computed earlier, and it would result to 100,187 divided by 16.09%. So the break-even point in dollar sales in total is 622,542. Now that we already have the overall break-even point in dollar sales, we can now proceed to the computation of the break-even point in dollar sales for each product. And that would be simply multiplying the break-even point in dollar sales to each of the percentage or the rate of the sales mix for each of the product. Let's take, for example, a product from the food category, the canned food. That would be 622,542 multiplied by 4.28%. It will give us a break-even point in dollar sales of 26,671. And that has the same method to each of the product over here. Let's say for toiletries, the liter sand, that would be 622,542 divided by times 6.26%, it will give us a break-even point in dollar sales for this product of 38,993. And to check once again, if we get the total or the sum of all of the values in this row in the break-even and dollar sales for each product, it will give us a similar value as to what is computed a while ago, which is 622,542. Finally, we can now proceed to the break-even point in units for each product, and that is solved by simply dividing the break-even point in dollar sales by the selling price of each of the products. Let's say the pet food treats. The break-even point in dollar sales is 37,434 divided by the selling price of 100. That will give us a break-even point in units of 374. Another example would be the clothes. That would be dividing 3,119 by 200. That will give us a break-even point in units for clothes of 16. And lastly, let's try toiletries, the grooming tools, dividing 8,059 by 310. That will give us 26 units. Overall, the BEP in units for each product, if we get the sum of all of these, that will give us an overall break-even point in units of 2,404. Now, to compare to the previous estimation of number units sold, we can see that it is greater in value than this one, which is 2,312 only. This will explain the negative or the net loss of the business from the mere estimation of number of units sold. As you can see, for example, under the food category, these four values over here, the break-even point in units of the products under the food category is greater than the estimated number of units sold. And that is similar or consistent to other food categories. Like, for example, here in the medicines, what is estimated to be sold is just 180 compared to the break-even point of 187. It is the same at every product except in this category, the supplies. As you can see, here the estimated number of units sold is 60, 30, 12, and 18, while the break-even point in units is 62, 31, 12, and 19. Under cage and houses, they have the similar. It could be, or we could say that the estimated number of units sold in cage and houses already hit break-even. And for the other products such as placemats and place beds, there's only a difference of 1, which means that it could be that these products are high volume products and that their sales mix are already accurate to the computation.
Now, after computing for the break-even point for each product, let us try solving for our net income in our retail operation. We assume here that the number of units sold is equal to the break-even point computed earlier in units. The format that we will be utilizing is the contribution margin format in determining the net income. That is sales plus variable cost to come up with the contribution margin and deduct from that the fixed cost allocated to retail operation to come up with the net income from retail operation. To start, we will be needing the following information. First, the selling price of each product. Next, the cost per unit. And lastly, the break-even point in units. Let us begin with the food products. For dry foods, our sales is 44,920 computed by multiplying 160 selling price times 281 units sold. Deduct from that our variable cost computed by multiplying 120 cost per unit times 281 units sold. Our resulting contribution margin for dry food is equal to 11,230. We do the same to other food products. For semi-moist food, our contribution margin is also 11,230. Our canned food, 8,423. For pet foods, 9,358. Moving on to the supplies, for bowl and feeders, our sales is equal to 8,111 computed by multiplying selling price of 130 times 62 number of units sold. Deduct from that the variable cost of 6,239 computed by multiplying 100 cost per unit times 62 number of units sold. Our contribution margin would be 1,872 for bowl and feeders. Do the same for other supply products. For placemats, contribution margin would be 1,560. For cage and houses, it would be 1,248. For pet beds, contribution margin would be 1,872. For the accessories, we repeat the same process. The collars and leashes sales is equal to 10,814 computed by multiplying 130 selling price times 83 number of units sold. Deduct from that the variable cost of 8,319 computed by multiplying 100 cost per unit times 83 number of units sold. The contribution margin would be 2,496 for collars and leashes. We do the same for clothes and carrier or travel bags and also toys, with the contribution margin of 780, 624, 4,367 respectively. Again, we do the same process for toiletries. For shampoo and soap, our sales is 56,150 computed by multiplying 200 selling price times 281 number of units sold. Deduct from that the variable cost of 47,728 computed by multiplying 170 cost per unit times 281 number of units sold. Our resulting contribution margin for shampoo and soap would be 8,423. Repeat the same process for litter and sand, 2,600. For cleaning tools, 4,679. For grooming tools, 1,560. For medicines, we do the same process. Sales for vitamins would be 78,611 computed by multiplying 420 sales times 187 units sold. Deduct from that the variable cost of 65,509 computed by multiplying 350 cost per unit times 187 units sold, resulting to a contribution margin of 13,102 for vitamins. For vaccines, the contribution margin would be 6,279. For deworming medicines, the contribution margin would be 7,487. For the total portion, we just add all of the sales for each product and then also add all of the variable costs for each product. After doing so, we deduct the computed variable cost from the total sales in order to come up with our total contribution margin of 100,187. As you can see, our contribution margin is equal to our fixed cost computed earlier. Thus, if we deduct this computed fixed cost to our contribution margin, our net income would be 0. This tells us that the break-even points we computed earlier are all correct.
Like what was previously mentioned, the fixed cost of the business is divided and allocated to the service and retail portion. With that, the break-even points are also separated. Since the break-even point for the retail is already discussed, let us move on to the computation of the break-even for the service portion of the business. First, let me discuss the assumptions used to compute the break-even points. So, first assumption, the pet grooming service of the business has 3 times more clients compared to the pet training service. And the next assumption, the pet boarding service has 2 times more clients compared to the pet training services. With this, we can formulate that the ratio of the clients of the business is 3:2:1. This means that for every 1 client of pet training, there will be 2 clients in pet boarding and there will be 3 clients in pet grooming. This will be used in the computation of the net income. So, like what was previously discussed in the informations and what was computed there, the service fee per client for pet grooming is 800, while for pet boarding and pet training is 500 each, and the computed variable cost per client is 257 for pet grooming and 250 for pet boarding and 225 for pet training. These amounts will now be multiplied to the apportioned clients using the assumptions to get the individual revenue of the service. So, the revenue for pet grooming is 2,400, which is computed by multiplying the service fee of 800 to 3. And for the pet boarding is 1,000, which is computed by multiplying service fee of 500 to the ratio of the client of 2. And for revenue, for pet training the revenue is 500, which is computed by multiplying service fee of 500 to the client of 1. So the total revenue for the service portion of the business is 3,900, and the variable cost of each service is computed by multiplying the variable cost per client to the apportioned clients using the ratio. Thus, the variable cost for pet grooming is 771, computed by multiplying 257 by 3, with a contribution margin of 1,629, which is computed by deducting the variable cost to the total revenue. And for the pet boarding, the variable cost is 500, which is 250 times 2, and the contribution margin is 500. While for pet training, the variable cost is 225, which is computed by multiplying 225 times 1, with a total variable cost of 1,496, and the total contribution margin of 2,404. This contribution margin will now be deducted by the fixed cost, which was computed and explained in the information sheet, so which is 64,908. So contribution of 2,404 minus the fixed cost of 64,908, the net loss is 62,404. And these values will now be used to compute the break-even point. So we will know how many clients does the business need so that the net income will be equal to 0, or the contribution margin will be equal to the fixed cost. So the business used the contribution ratio method. So the contribution margin ratio method is used, which is we need to get the ratio of the contribution margin, which is computed by dividing the contribution of 2,404 by the total sales of 3,900. which is equal to the contribution margin ratio of 61.64% rather. And this will be used in the computation of the total break-even point in sales. So the total break-even point in sales is computed by dividing the total fixed cost, by the contribution margin ratio. So 105,300 is computed by dividing the fixed cost of 64,908 by the contribution margin of 61.64%. So the total break-even point in sales is 105,300. Now let us proceed in computing the total break-even point in units or in clients. So we use two methods in computing the total break-even point in clients. So first is by computing the break-even point in sales individually and then dividing it by the service fee of each service to get the break-even point. So first is the sales mix. So how did we get the sales mix of each service? So this is the portion of the revenue for pet grooming compared to the total revenue. So this is computed by dividing the individual revenue of pet grooming, which is 2,400, by the total revenue of 3,900. Thus, the sales mix is 61.54%. And for the pet boarding, the sales mix is 25.64%, which is computed by dividing the individual revenue of 1,000 by the total revenue of 3,900, while the sales mix for pet training is 12.82%, which is 500 divided by 3,900, which is equal to 100%. Now let us compute the individual break-even point per sales of each service. So this sales mix percentage will now be multiplied to the total break-even point in sales to compute the individual break-even point in sales of the service. So 105,300 multiplied by the sales mix for pet grooming of 61.54% which is equal to 64,800. This will be the break-even point in sales of pet grooming. And the break-even point in sales of pet boarding is 27,000, which is computed by multiplying 105,300 times 25.64%. While for pet training, the break-even point in sales is 13,500, which is computed by multiplying 12.82% by 105,300. So if you add the total, the individual break-even point in sales of each service, it should be equal to the computed total break-even point in sales before. Next is we compute the break-even point per client. So this will be computed by dividing the individual break-even point sales of the service by the individual service fee or the service fee per client. So let us remember the service fee per client for pet grooming is 800, while for pet boarding and pet training is 500 each. So we divided 64,800 break-even point in sales of pet grooming by 800 to compute the break-even point of clients for pet grooming. This means that the business needs to serve 81 clients to get the break-even point in sales of 64,800 so that the net income will be equal to 0 and the contribution margin will be equal to fixed cost. Next is the computation of the break-even point for client for the pet boarding, which is 27,000 divided by 500, which is equal to 54, and for pet training is 13,500 divided by 500, which is equal to 27. Thus, the total break-even point per client is 162. This means that the business needs to serve a total of 162 clients to meet the break-even point so that the net income is equal to 0, just like what I said, and the contribution margin is equal to the fixed cost. And another way to compute the break-even point per client by computing the weighted average contribution margin per client of each service. So first, let us compute the contribution margin per client, which is deducting the individual selling price or the individual service fee by the individual variable cost. So 800 minus 257, 543 for pet grooming, while 250 for pet boarding, which is 500 minus 250, and 275 for pet training, which is 500 minus 225. Next is to get the product sales mix. So how do we get product sales mix? So this is computed by dividing the apportioned client to the total clients of the business. So the clients apportioned to pet grooming is 3 divided by the total clients of the business of 6. So 3 divided by 6. The product sales mix is 50% for pet grooming, while the product sales mix for pet boarding is 33.33%, which is 2 divided by 6, and for pet training is 16.67%, which is 1 divided by 6. Now, let us solve the weighted average contribution margin per client of the services, which is computed by multiplying the contribution margin per client to the product sales mix. So 543 times 50%, which is equal to 271.5, and 250 times 33.33%, which is equal to 83.33. And for pet training, 275 times 16.67%, which is equal to 45.83. Thus, the total weighted average contribution margin per client is 400.67. This will be used to compute the total break-even point in clients. So the formula to compute the total break-even point in clients is fixed cost divided by the total weighted average contribution per unit or per client. So 64,908, which is the fixed cost of the service, over the total weighted average contribution margin per client of 400.67, we get the total break-even point in clients of 162, which is equal to what we computed using the other method before. Next is to get the individual break-even point per client. So this will be computed by multiplying the total break-even point per client to the product sales mix. So 162 times 50% is equal to 81. So the total break-even point in clients of the pet grooming is 81, which is equal to what we have computed before. And for pet boarding is 162 times 33.33%, which is 54, which is equal to the other method. And for pet training is 162 times 16.67%, which is equal to 27, which is also equal to what we have computed before. So the total break-even point in clients of the business is 162. Now let us check the validity or the correctness of this computation. So we will use the computed break-even point in clients of each service. So 81 times the service fee of 800, we will get the total revenue for pet grooming of 64,800, and the variable cost will be computed by multiplying the variable cost per client of 257 times the clients of 81. We get the contribution margin of 43,983. And for pet boarding, we'll do the same method by multiplying these amounts to the total clients. So clients of 54 times 500, we get 27,000, and 250 times 54, we get 13,500, with the contribution margin of 30,500, computed by deducting 13,500 to the total revenue of 27,000. And for pet training, the total revenue for pet training is 13,500, which is computed by multiplying 500 to 27, and a variable cost of 6,075, which is 225 times 27, with a total contribution with a contribution margin of 7,425. And the total revenue for the business is 105,300, which is equal to the break-even point in sales or in revenue that was computed before. So this is equal. So check. And the variable cost is 40,392 with a contribution margin of 64,908, which is equal to the fixed cost. Thus, there is no net income or net loss, so zero. Thus, just like what we have checked, our computation is correct. So that will be the end of our discussion for the break-even point of our business in retail and in service. So to reiterate, the break-even point in sales or in revenue of the service portion is 105,300, with the total break-even point in clients of 162, which is individually 81 for pet grooming, 54 for pet boarding, and 27 for pet training. So, and while for products, the total break-even point in sales is 622,542, and the individual break-even point in units is also shown here. So that will be all for our discussion of break-even point of the 0 to 9 business. Thank you for listening.